paramedic was responding to what seemed like a routine call, but behind the doors lies something more complex, something of a pattern of control, fear, and silence that can end in tragedy.
Domestic and family violence, or DFV, is a pattern of behaviors, physical, emotional, financial, or sexual, used to dominate and control another person within a relationship. Paramedics, these moments are part of daily reality. They're often the first to arrive, stepping into homes where the violence has not yet been named, but the danger is already real. It's your role not just to treat injuries, it's to recognize risk, act within your authority, and help break the cycle of violence before another life is lost. Three things that acts create legal architecture for paramedic DFV response, yet the potential remains unrealized. This act defines domestic violence broadly beyond physical harm. Section 169E authorizes prescribed entities, including QAS, to share information without consent when necessary to respond to serious domestic violence threats. Yet paramedics remain uncertain about invoking this authority, typically citing uncertainty over reporting and referral responsibility. The Ambulance Service Act 1991 permits designated officers to disclose confidential information when required or permitted by law, which includes disclosure under the DFVPA 2012 information sharing provisions. The Human Rights Act 2019 enshrines protection from violence as fundamental, requiring QAS to act compatibly.
QAS policy specifies paramedics must document suspected DFV, conduct risk assessments using clinical judgment, and may share information when serious threats exist.
However, this policy has critical flaws. Structured risk assessment tools identify high-risk DFV with 70 to 77% accuracy, while clinical judgment shows significant lower validity. Secondly, there's no standardized screening. Healthcare professionals cite discomfort as primary barriers to inquiry, yet direct screening increases disclosure by 300%. Thirdly, manual referral pathways create friction-reducing follow-through. It was found that 67% of Australian paramedics felt unprepared for intimate partner violence cases.
Domestic and family violence has both long and short-term consequences and impacts the victim and witness. DFV can contribute to the development of serious and sometimes lifelong psychological disorders such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, and an increase in antisocial behavior and isolation. In 2024, 25.8% of all suicides and self-inflicted injuries were attributable to child abuse and neglect. Regardless of victim or witness, children are often faced with stunted cognitive and social psychological development. Physical abuse caused by DFV can range from minor to severe injuries causing lifelong damage, such as acquired brain injuries, chronic illnesses, and permanent disabilities. In 2023 to 2024, half of all hospitalizations that were involved with assault were due to DFV. Those who experience DFV can pass on trauma to their children through parenting approaches, modeled and learned behaviors, and potentially even epigenetic challenges. This inheritance of trauma is not something chosen by the parent or child, but the implicit conveyance of traumatic experience from one generation to the next. It is clear that DFV has a large impact on witnesses and victims. However, this is a systemic burden that impacts everyone. $22 billion of taxpayers' money was spent in 2015 to 2016, according to KPMG. With inflation, today that would cost around $32.8 billion. Now, right next to me, we're going to break down what that $22 billion was spent on. Just the ongoing cost of depression and anxiety caused by DFV was 60% of this $22 billion. DFV is not only a problem for victims, as it lays a significant burden on Australians' health and legal systems and workers, costing taxpayers tens of billions of dollars each year.
A potential strategy for increasing the number of positive outcomes relating to domestic and family violence is the implementation of a system that mandates simple but direct questioning to quickly and effectively determine the presence of domestic violence. We are suggesting the mandatory use of the following 4 questions by paramedics for cases with suspected domestic violence. Have you been hurt physically? Have you been insulted or talked down to? Have you been threatened with harm? Have you been screamed at or cursed at? Research shows that only a small number of healthcare professionals commonly inquire about domestic violence. Healthcare professionals often find these questions uncomfortable or fear that they may offend their patient. As a result, often the warning signs are missed. However, victims of domestic violence often explain how they wish they had been asked directly by their treating physician. Implementation of mandatory questioning would ensure that a much larger proportion of at-risk patients would receive the care and attention they require. We are suggesting that asking these 4 simple questions are made mandatory for cases with certain red flags, such as previous instances of violence. Potential for domestic and family violence can be identified by the dispatcher receiving the call, as well as by the paramedics themselves on scene. If potential for violence is identified, these questions could become highlighted on the treating paramedic's electronic ambulance report form, as both a reminder for the paramedic to ask these questions, but also as a method of securely storing this information for future reference or when referring onto another service. Responses to these questions can be included within the documentation, usually submitted at the conclusion of every job, and risk assessment can be made based on responses. This risk assessment could then be used to determine the necessary next steps.
By detecting the early signs of abuse, paramedics and other healthcare professionals can intervene before matters get worse by putting in safety plans and connecting people with crisis services and long-term support. Working together helps break down the barriers that stops people from talking and speaking up. It means patients get help sooner and have better chances of long-term recovery through counselling, housing and trauma support. It also rebuilds trust in the healthcare system and reduces the long-term mental and physical impacts of abuse. On a bigger scale, it takes the pressure off the ambulance services and hospitals. With more early detection, there'll be less repeat call-outs and admissions, which helps the whole system run better. Legally, it means a paramedic's duty of care by recognising and responding to abuse, and ethically, it is about doing no harm, promoting healing, and standing up for patients when they need it most.
When it comes to DFE, existing QAS policy lays the burden on paramedics, with ethical distress a common result and their oft-perceived powerlessness to make a difference. As per Bartlett et al.'s 2021 recommendation, we want ambulance services to take on that burden through education and policy creation. We have proposed providing a structured, scaffolded approach to potential DFE cases and legitimising this by embedding it within CPM as necessary practice. As Sawyer et al.'s 2018 research suggests, we believe this will increase paramedic preparedness and confidence and reduce complex decision-making in the field. Overall, reducing the cognitive load on paramedics and working towards the elimination of DFE and improving health in our communities. As QAS itself acknowledges, when the public calls for help, they expect paramedics will know what to do. When it comes to domestic and family violence, it's time we did.